Good afternoon, everybody. It's another PMTV show. I'm John Hyde from publicsectorpm.com.
And I'm Bernardo Torado from the Project Box. We're your hosts for PMTV, a program where we host group discussions with prominent project managers within the industry.
Now, today we have two very special guests. We have Deanne Earle and Naomi Kayetti. Deanne, would you like to tell us where you're from?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, John and Bernardo, for the invite to participate in PMTV. Really excited to be here, and I think we've got a really good topic. I'm actually sitting in northwest Italy, but I am originally from New Zealand, so that's why you don't hear much of an Italian accent.
Great. And how about you, Naomi? Where are you from today?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am way over here on the west coast in the United States in Northern California, probably about 100 miles away from Lake Tahoe and 100 miles away from the coast. So it's a great place to be.
Wonderful. It's great to have you on the show. Bernardo, tell us where you're from as well. We don't often do this.
Sure, that's not a problem. Well, I'm here in New York City. I'm actually in Manhattan, so if you hear noises, you know why. It's because I'm in the heart of it all, I suppose.
Great. And just to complete it, I'm actually broadcasting from Gloucester, which is in the southwest UK. So a truly international affair. We always like to do that on PMTV. Right, before we go into the actual topic for today, I just wanted to share a bit of audience feedback because feedback matters to us at PMTV. The most recent feedback I've had is that apparently I'm a lot like David Brent from The Office. So wasn't quite sure how to take that, but I'm definitely going to work on being much more professional and serious from now on. There we go. So if you have any feedback, let us know. We are at PMTV Pro on Twitter. And now we're going to the show. Bernardo is going to introduce today's topic.
Absolutely, and no relation at all to what you just discussed, but today, the topic for today is why do some project managers suck?
Wow, okay. I love this topic because I'm picking up a kind of Halloween October theme. I hope you like the scary font we used on the show flyer. So PM sucking, not like Dracula hopefully, but in terms of maybe we've got some room for improvement. So over to Deanne then to kick us off. Deanne, what do you think is the differentiator between a good and a bad project manager?
Thanks, John. I think this is a really good topic. Just makes me giggle thinking about it. But all seriousness, there are a number of things that differentiate good and bad PMs. But the thing I think that stands out for me is PMs who can be adaptive to these situations as situations arise. So they're able to use what makes sense when it makes sense to do so, depending on the dynamics of the situation they're in. So they're not just complete slaves to a methodology or one particular approach, because that might be the one that's being used. They're able to be flexible and adaptable depending on what's going on.
I was thinking about that one, Deanne, and in terms of communication skills, I mean, adaptability and how you communicate, I mean, do you think that's a key thing for a successful project manager?
Yeah, I'd agree with that too, because I think we've all been into clothing stores, haven't we, and we've seen the one-size-fits-all. I think if you're anything like me, which is petite, to put it politely, one size definitely does not fit all. So you have to be able to recognise what's going on, different dynamics. Not every single person is exactly the same. People have different needs, and in order to manage those needs and the situations and those people as well as the activities, you do need to be able to shift and morph and be flexible in both how you handle situations but also how you communicate, not only what is happening but what needs to be done. Not so much how it needs to be done, but I guess around expectations. So you don't want to be fixed to one particular blanket overarching method or approach, because that doesn't fit every single situation or every single person. So you have to adjust your communications and your interactions, how you develop relationships with people, and sometimes you need to be tougher than others, bit of tough love. Other times you need to be more coaching, mentoring. So you really do have to be able to adjust all the time.
Sorry, just to push a bit more on communication. I mean, you say there's no one size fits all, and I absolutely agree. And that obviously applies to a lot of different facets of project management, whether you're talking agile or waterfall or whatever. But I think on the communication, I don't think, in my opinion, you would never have an instance where you would think a quiet, introverted person who wasn't up for a lot of communication, a lot of contact, that kind of person would never make a good project manager, I would assert. I mean, what do you think about that? Is there room for a quiet back office project manager, or are we always looking for hands-on people, friendly, cuddly, huggable people?
I think if you're always looking for cuddly, huggable people, you might not achieve as much either. So I think it's about balance, really, isn't it? I think there are places for more backroom type checkbox, making sure that tasks are done, kind of project management. I guess the companies that I work with and the type of projects I'm involved with, the things that I see, or where I see quite a few failings or areas for improvement, shall we say, is where there is too much isolation. So the project is very much sitting in its own island and isn't connected. So from a communication point of view, there are the standard kind of project management attributes and behaviours about this is what we need to do, this is when we need to do it by, and this is why we're doing it. Then there are the other kinds of communication where you're really facilitating actually getting that stuff done. And it's all about politics, really, isn't it? So you have to be able to deliver different messages at different times to different people. You might deliver the base message may be exactly the same, but for person A, you may be more directive than person B. You may be more huggy and warm and touchy-feely. And then there are other times where you need to be very firm, and this is the way we're doing it. So your communications are, then of course there is external communications and internal to the project communications. So you've got your messages you're sending out to the business about what the project is there for, what it's going to achieve, why it's happening, those kinds of corporate communications. And then you've got internal communications about where are we up to, what are we doing, how are we going, what are our blocks. So you've got communications comes in multi-levels as well. And you just have to be able to recognise that there are different types and that each different type does really require a different approach.
I was going to say, Deanne, I completely agree with you, and I also think that extroversion or introversion is really not the core issue. It's really more about confidence, because you can be an introvert and have a lot of confidence, can command presence,
yes,
and being able to lead a particular team, compared to an extrovert who is very insecure, who really doesn't know how to lead, and then you have issues with the project itself. And I really like what you were talking about before, which is all about having the ability to have that level of flexibility. I found many times where PMs are evangelists to one specific methodology, which I think is fantastic, but I also think that if you're looking to move across industries or companies, it's important to have an increased level of flexibility in looking at these different methodologies as a tool in the toolbox versus it just being, like as you said before, one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree. I think there are many project managers out there who are, as you say, quite fixated on one particular approach and almost try to mold the project into that approach rather than molding the approach to what the project needs. And you're absolutely on the money with regards outgoing, kind of gregarious people who perhaps are quite insecure, scratch the surface slightly, and you can expose that quite quickly, can't you? So, yeah, sometimes quiet is good.
Great. Thank you very much, Deanne. Bernardo, are you going to lead us into the next question?
Sure, absolutely. So Naomi, as we're talking about just the different types of skill sets that are required to just really stand out and what differentiates between good and bad PMs, what are your thoughts around self-awareness? How does self-awareness actually play into the ability to lead projects?
Well, projects are really all about people, processes, and politics. And a project manager spends 90% of their job communicating. So self-awareness is really about being conscious of what you're good at while acknowledging what you still have to learn. And it includes admitting when you don't have the answers and owning up to your mistakes. So I think when you become more self-aware, you begin to focus on what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, and really when should you be using these strengths, and be cognizant of when you overuse a strength that it can become a weakness. So I think if you're for example, if you're a detailed-oriented person and you like to focus on the detail and you start micromanaging a task with one of your team members, they could become frustrated, they could back off on the tasks, they can become very unproductive, and that's really not where you need to focus your efforts. I think the other thing too, as a project manager, there's different ways of getting feedback that we're probably going to talk about later, but 360-degree feedback is an excellent way to get feedback on how others see you and hear from others on things that you should be doing better as a project manager, whether it's communicating, whether it's how you're leading meetings and the kind of meetings, whether it's a combination of how you're using your soft and hard skills. But that feedback is really important so you can apply it when it's needed as you go throughout the project. And I think one of my mantras is if you're not learning, you're not leading. You should be asking good questions throughout the project. As team members approach you, you can have casual conversation with them, and maybe if you're active listening, you can hear messages from them that will help you in how you should be communicating with the different team members. As well as if you're having meetings with your sponsor, you can also be actively listening for messages and ways that you can address the politics in the organization. As well as if you're in a matrix organization and you are working with a functional manager, they can help you a lot with how you deal with your stakeholders, how you can develop better partnerships with other members in the organization, your managers and your supervisors. They're kind of working at that level. They can help you with conflict management, politics. They can help you address some of the issues that you're having with team members. And I think you have to kind of consider, as a project manager, you're really responsible for your own personal development. So you have to kind of think about, well, besides getting the feedback, what other tools could I use? There's a lot of tools out there for you to do a self-assessment to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Like, for example, Myers-Briggs is the one that's been out there for a long time. It's an easy test to take. It will give you some insight. But there's also other more comprehensive tools, like, for example, the Strength Development Inventory. There's also another tool called DISC. And I think you need to make an investment in yourself. Using these tools allows you to basically address how you can progress as a project manager. You're going to get more projects. You're going to have to deal with more people. The communication channels that you're going to have to deal with are going to increase, and they may become more complex, depending on if you're working on an international project, a regional project, a statewide project. And the other thing I think that's been real important in my development is you need to be actively reading leadership books. And in this particular area, one of the books that I would recommend is Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence book. It's going to basically kind of break down self-awareness in 4 parts. One of them is how to manage your emotions, how do you address empathy, your social skills, and the biggest part of it is self-awareness.
I think that's really, really great. I mean, a lot of the things that you talked about, in essence, are fantastic tools that I've used, and I know many PMs have used to be able to get a better understanding around how they make decisions or how they interact. And many times, what people don't realize is that when they start to lead a team, within the first 30 seconds of meeting that new team that they've never met you before, they've already made a judgment of you. So some of the self-awareness components can be definitely taught, but there are other exercises that you kind of touched upon that help people become more aware of what are you doing to contribute to the behavior that's actually happening within the group itself. And a part of it could be either your demeanor or how you're communicating. And it could also mean that there may be some individuals in the group that you may quite not like at all, and that is possible. And so what is the reactions that you're causing from that, without having met them or having worked with them? What exactly are you doing to foster maybe not a good environment, but maybe a little bit more of a hostile one? So I think that's definitely great. John, are there anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I was really interested in, obviously Naomi covered a range of mechanisms for getting feedback on your performance as a project manager, and a question that sprung to my mind, which maybe Naomi or Deanne would like to have a go at, was how do you determine what is good feedback and something that you're going to take on board and try and do something about, versus something that is bad feedback and for whatever reason somebody is saying this thing but it's not really going to help you. Does anybody have a feel for how to determine what is good and what is bad feedback?
Well, I'll just kind of toss out all feedback is good feedback. I mean, the fact that someone has either stopped by your office, sent you an email, or stayed after a meeting to talk to you to either share an issue or address a concern or maybe just chat, that's your opportunity. They've opened the door to you to share something, and I think you can pick up a lot of things from the feedback, good or bad. You can watch their body language. You can assess the tone in their voice. I think that's a great opportunity for you to show some empathy because someone's taken the opportunity to share a message with you. So I say all feedback is good feedback, and as a project manager, you decide what you're gonna do with it. You may just sit and listen. You may go back to your desk and jot some notes down, and I think it may also lend itself to having casual conversations. That the hallway conversations are some of the best conversations that you will have, because people won't speak up in meetings. People won't, or some people will hide behind an email and send it to you. And so I think as much as you can, I'll take in that feedback however you can get it.
Thank you. Deanne, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just like to pick up on something there that Naomi said earlier that I think can help anyone, project manager or otherwise, in a leadership role, I guess, figure out if it's constructive or destructive kind of feedback. And I think that's around developing very good for yourself, your self-awareness and your own development in terms of soft skills, definitely active listening is a very, very good one in any leadership role. As Naomi says, any feedback is good feedback in terms of you're actually getting some feedback, which is a start. Then I guess if it's fairly negative or judgmental or destructive kind of messaging that's coming at you, being able to not necessarily diffuse it, but be able to drill down into it to find out where it's coming from, because sometimes the information or the message that's coming at you is quite emotional and subjective, and being able to ask some questions and understand where that's coming from is really good. So active listening is a very, very good soft skill to develop and be able to apply in those kinds of situations to get to the real message or the real underlying thing. And it may be that the feedback isn't actually for, the feedback is for you, but for coming from a different reasoning. So being able to ask the questions and find out what that is, you may help the person to be able to address that themselves. It may not actually be anything to do with you, but more situational. So those are really key things as well around feedback and being able to figure out if it's good, bad, yours or somebody else's or the situation.
Hey John, just building on what Deanne was just talking about, I'm of the mindset that it's great that someone feels comfortable in sharing me some feedback. I think it's important to be aware as to the readiness level of the person that's listening. As Deanne was pointing out, not all folks are open to receiving the feedback. I also push it a little bit further, where I tend to question where is that feedback coming from. I've been in situations where I've had leaders, because they didn't really have the backbone to stand up to their peers, would just give feedback just so that they can take a checkbox, if that makes any sense. So their feedback really wasn't genuine or authentic. It was just because they didn't really feel comfortable pushing back or defending their subordinates. So I think it's just relative to what the feedback is coming from, and I think it's important that overall, if someone does come to you, take the time out to actively listen, but also really think about where is it coming from. What I tend to do when I do receive feedback is, for me, it's really finding out, okay, give me concrete examples. I've had people just say, well, I don't like the way you manage that situation. I'm like, okay, what exactly? So it's on the onus on you to get more specific from those individuals around what exactly are they seeing that you don't see. And then keep that in mind. And if you notice that there's a pattern, then there's definitely something to address. Or maybe it's just a one-time situation. We all have off days. So we always have to take that into consideration from a larger standpoint.
If I could just add something else too to what Bernardo's saying, John, is on the absolute flip side, is you cannot make everyone happy. So, someone may not be happy with the way that you personally are behaving in a situation. However, for the situation and for the overall delivery of what you are there to do and what you are there to achieve for the organisation, it can, I'm not saying it's completely irrelevant, however, it may not be something that needs addressing. It's more, well, kind of tough love, firm yet fair. This is the situation. This is how we have to be, and this is what we've got to achieve. So this is why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving, because of these deliverables that we've got to make sure that we're achieving. So it's almost positioning as well, where you are at in the project and where you're at in the delivery. And some people will not be quite as engaged in that journey as others, or may be on a different path in terms of how they feel it should be run. However, you're there, you're engaged to deliver something, you need to make sure that you do that. And some people may all by the wayside, or may come along for the journey, or be quite engaged. However, you cannot make everyone happy. So don't try and do that either, would be my advice.
Great. I was really interested in something Bernardo said. Mind you, you're all saying very interesting things, but one thing that struck me was, Bernardo, you said about some people don't do feedback. Some people can't take feedback. And I was wondering if any of you had any advice on how to deal with that emotional response that you'll feel within yourself when somebody gives you feedback. Maybe at first you might dismiss it out of hand, but then maybe it starts to sink in. But perhaps you're fighting against yourself inside because you're taking this feedback as a negative criticism, when actually, if you can somehow accept it, then you can start to build. So how do you deal with your emotional response to feedback? Any tips? How about Naomi?
Well, my thought on it, and I think this is something that all project managers are going to have to gain with experience. But I think you need to be open and be flexible and be present. And by that I mean is that I think when someone is giving you feedback, they're taking the time to do that for a reason, and I think you just kind of have to just sit back and listen. I think you shouldn't react to it. I think you should use your active listening skills to really take in all the messages that are being relayed to you. And then I think the productive thing with that is to figure out goals and objectives on how to improve, whether it's communication with stakeholders, whether it's how you're handling scheduling, how you're addressing risks on the project, and it could be any variety of things. But this is, I take this as, and project managers should look at this as an opportunity and not a negative thing, because your personal growth is dependent on success and failure, whether it's a small failure in communication, or you have a project that failed. You want to fail forward, and I think from that you're going to learn lessons, and you're going to do things better the next time. You're going to make sure you don't repeat and make the same mistakes, and that's really the whole point of looking at this as an opportunity.
Great. Deanne or Bernardo, did you want to have anything on that, or did you want to go on to the last question?
I just wanted to add one thing. I would say that for me it's been about the context of the relationship of the person that I'm giving feedback to. So if I don't know the person very well and I haven't really built that relationship with them, I need to. For me, I take a bit more of a softer approach versus having a formal sit-down. And what I mean by that is either going out for a cup of coffee or going out for lunch and getting to know the person a little bit more, and then weaving the feedback into the conversation, and then going back to it later on once the relationship has been established a little bit more, just because you planted the seed. Whereas there may be other situations where being able to provide that formal sit-down kind of feedback does work. So I think it's just relative to the situation and the individual at hand. But I do agree. I think it's when you are receiving or giving feedback, is that active listening skills that is extremely important. But also, how do you incorporate that into what you're doing to make yourself better, as Naomi was talking about.
Great. Deanne, did you want to chip in?
I was just thinking about our overall topic about why some PMs suck, and I think the way that we're talking about feedback is very pertinent to that, because project management along with any management or leadership role is not just about that project or the way that you are monitoring what's going on with that project. It's primarily about human dynamics and people and politics. So as Bernardo's saying, if you're not conscious of those human dynamics, and you're not self-aware, as Naomi was saying, about your own behaviours and responses, then being able to interact with others and provide feedback in a way that your audience is receptive to, or understands the context of, then yeah, you're gonna suck. And you're not going to get the that relationship's not really going to go any further, and your project is going to suffer as a result.
So Deanne, so building on that, how would you help project managers become better leaders then?
Well, certainly my own personal experience has been, I've kind of kept my ears and eyes open around me about how other people that I have good relationships with and that I see exhibiting really good leadership behaviours and achieving a lot with their teams, and their teams are developing as a result and achieving great things. And I look at what is it that they're doing, and how are they achieving what they achieve, and how do those dynamics work, and what are those characteristics and behaviours that they exhibit. And then I guess I sort of look at, well, how does that apply to me and my situation and the people that I work with, and how can I use those or not. So there might be half a dozen people or a bunch of people through different roles that you're involved in different companies, and pulling bits out that work for you, and perhaps leaving aside bits that don't. But certainly also really honing in on those soft skills. You can be absolutely top-notch, the bee's knees at all of the hard skill stuff, but really crap at the soft skills. So you really, really need to focus on those, because that's where the gold lies.
Naomi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think as many project managers are out there getting their certificates. A certificate may get you in the door, but I think, as Deanne was saying, you need to have a daily focus on your development of your leadership soft skills to determine whether you have courage, perseverance, and tenacity to be a great project manager. It really is a great opportunity to be project managers. It is a lot of fun, but it is a lot of hard work too. And I guess my 4 power tips for success I would share is that I think, again, I'm kind of focus on you are responsible for your own personal development. So I think whether you sit down and I'd start with like a 1-page, real simple personal development plan. I do have information on my website. You can download some templates, but it's basically addressing what are your goals and objectives. What's your vision for where you want to be 5 to 10 years from now, and applying that for how you're managing your projects. Do you see yourself as someone who wants to manage just a bunch of small projects? Do you see yourself wanting to become a program manager and be responsible for leading other project managers and coaching and mentoring them? Or do you really want that really big project that you want to lead? That might be an international project, it might be statewide, it might be a very large initiative. So I think those are some of the things that you really need to kind of think about. It's something you're going to have to sit down and just spend some time. But I think out of that, I kind of mentioned you want to develop a personal vision, and that is kind of where am I going, and what's going to help guide me to get there. And I kind of mentioned tools you want to look at to assess your personality traits. A big thing this year is focusing on, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of leadership speakers talking about strength-based leadership, where we are trying to do more with less. I think this is probably across the globe. A lot of organizations have downsized. They don't have the budgets, and so a lot of project managers are finding themselves really juggling multiple projects, international projects, and they don't have all the resources available to them. So, I think you really need to focus on your strengths and fill in gaps where you're weak if you can. And I think that you also need to focus on developing your leadership style, because how you may lead one project in one organization may be entirely different than how you might lead it in another. And these are things that you're going to learn, and that's, that is kind of what we were talking about, getting that active feedback from either your peers, your other project managers that you may work with on projects. You may have a program manager and a PMO you're going to get some feedback from if you have the opportunity to work closely with them. Certainly your functional manager should be available for you and kind of address some feedback. And I think another key person that you're going to really rely on as you get more projects under your belt is your sponsors. They work hand in hand with you throughout the project to kind of help remove barriers. You're going to constantly be talking to them to address the triple constraint on scope, schedule, and resources. And they're going to be integral to your development, I believe, in getting you to be a more successful project manager. But don't rely on the feedback you're not receiving. You need to rely on the fact that you need to kind of push yourself. So I think I'd recommend 2 books that are out there right now for project managers. One of them is called Standout, and it was written by Marcus Buckingham. The thing I like about that book is because it's written and there's research done to allow you to take this a test, and the test basically will give you results that will give you feedback on how others see you. You'd have to read the book to get more information, but it's kind of a great way to get a 360. And the book has a report that you can download, and it will tell you your top, I think your top 10 strengths. So I really liked it because it was relatively inexpensive. You could get some good feedback, and it's a tool you can use. And the other most recent book that was just released is called The 15 Laws of Growth by John Maxwell. And I don't know if anyone's read any Maxwell books, but it's great to pick up, put it in your library, keep it handy. But he just released it, and I'm just going to leave you with 2 quotes that he shared when he launched the book. One of them is, if you're going to grow yourself, it's going to have to be on purpose. And the other one is, be willing to fail your way to success and have no fear. You need to look for valuable lessons in that failure. And that's going to be a tough one for project managers because you want to see yourself as successful. And I don't think until you get more projects under your belt where you're really going to see that those failures are going to lead you to your success.
Great.
John, did you have any thoughts to add to the question?
Myself? No. To be honest with you, I'm really impressed. I enjoyed those quotes. That was really great. And I know that I've been learning, and I'm not going to say any more than that. So, do you want to take us to the outro then, Bernardo?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the content that was discussed here, Deanne and Naomi, have been fantastic. I could not agree with all what you've just said as far as what's important. And I think to wrap the whole concept of why do PMs suck, I think from what I'm hearing, it has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lack of self-awareness, and the feedback and all the other exercises and tips that you've just covered, I think, make it that much more stronger for them to really focus on. So I really appreciate you joining us at PMTV. So before we go, can you let the audience know about how they can reach you? So could we start with you, Naomi, and then go to Deanne?
Sure. You can go to my new website. It's www.insightofaleader.com, and you can find my personal information, my blogs, and my favorites out there of books and resources.
Deanne?
Yeah, for me, you can find my website at www.unlikebefore.com. There's also a link to my blog from there. You can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @unlikebefore, and feel free to find me and connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, look forward to hearing from people if they have any questions or need any other assistance or input.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. So again, I'm John Hyde from publicsectorpm.com.
And I am Bernardo Trovato from the Project Box. Thank you again for joining. Until next time, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.